Okay, it's 6 o'clock, and I would like to call us all to order. I am very glad to see all of you. Is it on? No, you still can't hear me, you're this close to me. I'm a little closer, okay. Well, I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight. We do have a quorum, and I think we have a couple members who may be a little bit late. I have a few remarks to make this evening before we get started. First, I'd like to thank everyone for being here and being willing to serve the community and being a part of the Charter Commission. I know that we all come from different backgrounds, maybe ethnicities and faiths, but we all value and honor the privilege of living in and being a part of the American way of life and governance. So having said all of that, I was thinking that the Charter Review Commission is a board, and we have assigned responsibilities on behalf of all of the citizens of Keene, and that we should proceed in the same manner that all the other boards and bodies do, by starting our meeting with an invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance and pledge to the Texas flag. So this evening, I've asked former Mayor Gary Heinrich to give our invocation, and as you may, and some do know, that I did formerly serve 10 years as an elected member of the Keene City Council from 2009 to 2019. And Mayor Heinrich was the last of 4 mayors that I served with in those years. He was the chairman of the previous 2 charter commissions, and he served 18 years on and off as mayor of Keene. So I consider him to be a great friend to Keene and a mentor not just to me, but to the city of Keene. So if we could all stand while Mr. Heinrich has our invocation, and then we'll have the pledges.
I've written it out here, so it's going to be long. No, I'm kidding you. Well, Father, we thank you for blessings of this day. We thank you for this committee that's been assembled for the benefit of the citizens of Keene. And we pray that the decisions that are made here are for the benefit of our citizens and not self-serving. It requires unity. We can disagree, but we need to do it agreeable. And so I pray that that will bless each of these members and the work that they got before them, that the final result will be something that the citizens will be pleased with and will be for their benefit. So we pray that in Jesus' name and thank you for it. Amen.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
I cannot memorize that. And it's small. I mean, it's a little one.
I guess everybody that's here knows that you were set up alphabetic and you had one chance to switch, so are you in the seats that you're happy with? And I guess whoever's not here gets what they have. So our city secretary will keep track of where we're sitting, and I guess that's where we'll continue to sit. We have a few comments from Ms. Russell at this time.
The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda, but I have to let you know that I once again made a mistake on our agenda. Without changing the day of Thursday to Tuesday, it may cause confusion, and that was on the posted agenda. After consulting our city attorney, he recommended we could still have this meeting as it is an advisory committee. Just please do not make any motions or action. So that would mean tabling the consent agenda, which is approval of the minutes, to our next meeting. I want to humbly apologize for doing this mistake again. This is not my quality of work, and want to reassure you that this was my error alone, and it greatly sickens me that it has impeded the work of this committee, and that is not my intention. So again, I assure you that, you know, we've already taken actions for this to not happen again, and it will be corrected. And again, I sincerely apologize for these silly little mistakes that are so important to your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I would like to add, she is keeping up with two commissions, BBC, AG, and Council, all
Yes.
along. So
We know.
it's quite busy, so.
Yes. We know you're doing your best for us. Thank you. Okay, so then moving forward, we can review, discuss the various things we have. And number 3A is call for additional charter sections to review that were not included in the city attorney or council's recommendations. What I am hoping that we will do at this time is that, as we discussed before, we will put these things forward, and then we will move to the considering and reviewing the section-by-section stuff that Mr. Chester has put together for us. And then after we do that, we will start to discuss the things that others have brought to us, or things that you have brought that are not in his comments, so that we can get all the things that he prepared for us up and out of the way, and then start on the new things. So I would like to allow for a member of the public who wishes to speak to step forward now, present their item, which is not in these items, and then if any of you have brought some things, you can put those things forward at that time.
Is that me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good evening, Charter Commission. I first want to applaud Robert Bradbury and his wife Jessica just for being involved. It's good to see you step out and, you know, join. You know, Chuck's not here, but rather newcomers and Troy. It's good to see you guys here getting involved with all these veterans. So good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. Ms. Beeson reminded me that the exhibit you have in front of you, so it's 4 pages, 2 documents back to back, is unsigned. I assure you that's not anonymous. I am responsible for that. Okay, I'm going to present to you tonight the opportunity to make a major impact on the psyche, collective attitude, and overall optimism of the residents of Keene. And you're welcome to follow along with me here, please. I'm not going to reveal why until the conclusion, but I do want to suggest how. First, please refer to the current city charter, specifically page 9, and the item titled Article 4, Municipal Election, and focus on section 409, canvassing of the election and declaration of results. The second sentence in section 409 reads, to be elected to office of the municipality, a person must receive more votes than any other person. It's a voting system known as plurality voting. There are myriad voting systems and processes throughout the world. In fact, there are so many that they are researched and studied by universities, foundations, institutions, agencies. Here are a few. Listed below are just a very few. In fact, it represents only 20% of the many that I ran into and researched, but I have underlined 2. One is Medium, which I'll be using tonight, and the other is Texas Politics at utexas.edu, an excellent site that has graphs, and it's easy to read, and you click on one and it takes you to something else. Very easy to understand about all the different voting systems there are worldwide. According to Dr. Thomas McEnany, who's a mathematician and social scientist with advanced degrees in physics and philosophy, and he's writing in Medium that I referenced a few seconds ago. It's a publication for those who study voting systems worldwide. One of the most common voting systems in use is the plurality vote. plurality votes play a key role in most modern democracies. Sure, when you select the class president, who gets the most votes? Where are we gonna eat tonight? Where are you gonna go after this commission's over? You know, most votes wins. Choosing a group leader only makes sense that you would choose the person who gets the most votes. When there are more than two options, however, a plurality vote is deeply flawed, McEnee writes. Notably, a plurality vote with multiple candidates is highly vulnerable to the spoiler effect. We're going to look at that in a minute. The center squeeze effect, and you can elect a candidate who would lose against any other candidate in a head-to-head contest. The most common ways that elections go wrong are through a spoiler effects and this center squeeze. Plurality voting is exceptionally vulnerable to the spoiler effect because plurality voting ballots only allow voters to express an opinion about a single candidate. Plurality voting outcomes are routinely decided by spoilers. Similarly, it's possible for a plurality vote to elect a candidate who would never be able to win on his or her own. I'm not going to get into that guy from France in 1785 who decided about do they want pizza or spaghetti or some kind of pasta, and he applied that to large groups of voting, but that system is named after him. Anyway, let's look at the most recent elections in Keene. I want to stop here and say that this is not personal. You know, there's some people here whose election to the council is itemized here. But that's not the point. This is not personal. And whoever you are, you were elected under the system that was in place at that time. So I'm suggesting a new system. And also, I do believe that any candidate who was elected with a plurality that we have most recently would win in a runoff, that they would be there anyway. So it's not about you, it's about the system. Let's look at 2022. Two most recent elections in Keene. In place one, there were 782 votes. It was won by candidate B. Candidate B got 41.8% of the vote. Yet, candidates A and C garnered 455 votes, 58.2% of the vote. How I interpret that is that 58.2% of the voting residents did not want candidate A. Yet, they have to live with the results of candidate A. Let's look at place three. It had 754 votes in 2022. It was won by candidate A with 347 votes. Yet candidate B and C got 407 votes, 54%. I'm saying 54% of the voters did not want candidate A. Let's move to the next page, page 3, the 2023 election, most recent. In Ward 1, 598 people voted, and candidate B received 47% of the votes. Candidates A and C, 315, 53% of the vote. Note, please, that the difference between candidate B and C is only 9 votes. Now, do you think that's a spoiler? What do you think? I think so. Let's look at Ward 2, 595 votes. The winner, we'll get to the second. The winner, candidate B, got 47% of the votes. Now, below that, there's a typo. It should read candidate A and C. Together got 311 votes. 53%. 53% of the voters did not vote for the person who took the seat. A and B were separated by only 19 votes. Do you think candidate C played a spoiler role? Of course he or she did. For a single winner system, plurality is a terrible idea. There's one major way to mitigate the problem with plurality voting. Always require a simple majority. If no candidate earns a majority, require a runoff between the top two. I want you to consider these points. Number one, a person who's elected to the city council by a plurality then sits on a council that decides all issues by a majority vote. It seems to be a little inconsistent. All boards and committees that report to the council decide issues by a simple majority vote. All surrounding organizations decide issues by a vote of a simple majority, including the SWAU board, the Keene ISD school board. I confirmed this today with Ricky. They vote on the quorum present. That's the vote, a majority of that vote. The Keene Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, the CTA School Board, and the Keene Church Board, and I confirmed that today with Abner Sanchez. Although Michael said it's usually unanimous, when there is a vote, it's a majority rule. 4, and very important, simple majority voting would eliminate the possibility of a spoiler effect, including, and have we heard this before? Have we heard rumors to this? The candidate whose participation is specifically for the purpose of disruption and turmoil. Is that possible? I think we know it is. I think we know that it's happened. The majority results create a situation where most people agree, and even those who don't will accept the legitimacy because they understand the majority rules. Last page. And now, for the real reason, why to have a city election decided by a vote of a simple majority. And to counteract the criticism, there's going to be a runoff, and there may be costs for that if there is a runoff. Because the cost of a runoff election is minimal compared to the positive feelings generated by selecting a majority winner. Residents feel that their vote counted because the candidate who received the most votes is the winner. Even voters whose candidate didn't win can accept the results because the majority won. In a democracy, the majority rules. Residents feel good about the elections. According to the University of Minnesota, for every 1% of life satisfaction increase, you increase your propensity to vote by 2%. So now people start voting. You increase your emotional well-being because you feel like your life has a little bit more meaning. Maybe you can be a role model for your grandchild. You can tell them, go out and vote. Your vote makes a difference. Here's a new one. According to journals of SagePub, a compilation of essays on voting systems, citizens who voted for a candidate who ends up as elected are more satisfied with democracy than those who supported a candidate that does not. The assumption is that voting for a candidate who wins increases one's level of satisfaction with city government and with the city that is governed. We're just about to close here. Residents may expect council members to implement good policies, and this makes them more positive about the state of government. This can generate positive emotions when associated with perceptions of victory, as in other domains, such as how good we feel when the Rangers won the World Series. Winning can influence our mood, self-esteem, and even physiological reactions. The majority of people feel good about Keene because the will of the majority is adopted. There's less complaining about potholes and more willingness to solve problems. My suggestion is that that language be changed, that to be elected to an office of the municipality, a person must receive 50% of the vote plus one additional vote. Okay?
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
To me,
May I ask him a question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you've obviously spent quite a bit of time looking at this.
quite a bit.
So my usual response is, how do you think this would happen? If you elect in November, the council takes their seats a week later, where are you going to have a runoff? What's your plan for that?
Well, I think as I read through the state guidelines, there's a mechanism for a runoff. Now, it may be a Saturday, I don't know, but there's guidelines for a runoff in the state guidelines for voting. It has to be so many days, has to be published in so many ways, and then there is a runoff. Now, the Saturday would be mitigated through early voting, if it is a Saturday. But my point is the confidence, the goodwill generated, and the feeling of self-esteem, and what voters feel because the majority is speaking outweighs any cost for that runoff, if there is a runoff. You know, I didn't have the exhibit, but the last election, I think it was 2021, when Robert Cooper won, he won by 50% plus one. That's what he won by, 50% plus one. And I didn't want to waste the time to show that to you today, but I thought that was kind of interesting. And you can find that. Those are online. Okay. So yeah, if there's a runoff, there's going to be a little cost, but I think that cost is minimal compared to the advantages of the voters feeling that their voice is heard.
Okay,
Thank you,
so
Paul.
we will be moving these things to the end. I know Mr. Knott wants to leave. We're not going to discuss this further at this time. He's made his presentation. I guess my only question would be, is it per our charter that everybody is seated within 1 week or 1 week of canvassing the votes, or is that just our tradition? And then you are right, we would have to consider additional language and get information from the attorney about what that would mean. So,
The mayor pro tem is nominated and elected at the following council meeting after the votes are, when the votes are canvassed.
correct.
That's when the mayor pro tem is assigned or elected, or however you want to call it. So we have to modify that aspect of it as well.
Right.
If there was potential for a runoff.
But I'm not clear, and I wasn't reading for this particular thing, and even though I may sit in an office with Paul, he did not reveal to me what he was presenting, so I didn't know ahead of time either. But I don't know if it's in the charter that everybody is seated so quickly, or if that's just what we do. So, you know, does that mean then we have to extend those terms another however many weeks it takes to have a runoff vote? So, okay, are there additional items from anybody here on the committee to present this evening yet for further consideration other than the things that Mr. Chesser has given us? No one else has anything?
Nope, I do.
Oh, okay. Troy?
In section 302, I brought this up quite a while ago, and it's the expense reimbursement. And with inflation happening, and I know it's just a community gesture that I'm bringing this up, but I feel like we should double the amount of money that we pay the city council people and the mayor for being able, you know, for coming here and doing the business of Keene. That was one of mine.
And you want to have it be like $20 a meeting and the monthly allowance, $100 to the?
Yes, yes, ma'am. And then Rob wanted to add something as well.
Do you want to do the $100 allowance too?
Yeah, so $20 and then $100 for the mayor.
For the mayor, that's just expense. It's just an expense account, I think. Not a,
Oh, expense allowance, yeah.
it's not like she gets.
Yeah, she doesn't get it. Yeah, no, you're right.
Since we're changing that paragraph, I'd like to have the last sentence say, all activities that require reimbursement must have prior approval of the council.
Yes.
So what this is saying is then that they're giving $10 right now for each meeting, which I recall that, and $50 for monthly expense allowance for the mayor, and then anything above and beyond those things. Now, for instance, if I used to go to a workshop, if I was going to some meeting in Austin, what have you, all of that would be approved ahead of time. So I can't remember, I don't remember what it was called, but I remember going to Austin a couple of times. And I remember going to other workshops around the Metroplex.
So I just want to add the word prior to that last sentence.
That's good. And are you still staying with $50 or $100 on the other?
You think 50? I guess 50's fine.
You don't think it needs to be more than 50? I mean, I don't know. I didn't serve at that, and I know.
I see this as a volunteer. I mean, we get $10 a meeting. I know sometimes the hours are longer, but I guess if you have been in the volunteer situation,
Thank you
business,
so much.
you don't expect pay. So, but that's only.
But you don't want to disrespect it by making it so menial, so little that there's no respect at all.
Yeah.
As you say that, I think about that, because I know what you mean. I've done lots of that too, so,
Well,
okay. Well, we can put it up and we can vote it
Yeah.
down later. So you want to stay with the 50?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, we could compromise and go to 75.
Sure.
Ms. Gillen?
Madam Chairman, I think that everybody knows that it is a volunteer situation, and when they apply for it, and that would stand to reason, and I think that if they eventually decide to give a little more money, that's fine, but I don't see any reason to be changing anything right now. They can always say, they want more money, but if they apply for it, they already know it's volunteer.
Okay.
Just an opinion.
Right. Anyone else?
My second one that I had
Yes, sir.
is on page 28, section 11.09. No officer or employee to accept gifts. And I know the state law addresses the actual dollar amount, and I would like to just make sure that we abide by those same guidelines and put that dollar amount on here in that document in some fashion, in some wording of a sentence. $50.
Which item is it again on 28?
But it doesn't say that on here.
Okay, which item, which section?
11.09.
9.
Okay.
One thing I've seen with some other cities, they've taken section 1109, they push it to their code of ordinance and put it as a code of ethics. That way it can get changed without having to go through this whole, process. So the city council itself can revise it whenever it's needed. City of Fort Worth does that, and I can bring example next meeting.
I believe you. But that's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
Okay. Do you have any comments about this, any of you? Rob?
I don't know, I never thought about making it an ordinance, but I do agree we need to make sure that it's specified in here. I mean, I know it says she'll agree with the state law, but still I think we should delineate what that state law says, which would be easier to do through an ordinance if that ever changes, so.
So what came up for me when you talked about the ordinance is that I think we should have something in here referring to it, and then the council, if a council decides they need to put into effect an ordinance specifically to address it, then that could come up. There's nothing, by it being here, it doesn't prevent it from coming up as an ordinance and being further clarified. So I think, there could be some things in here like that that perhaps along the way could evolve, even including the $50. I don't know. That's probably a question to find out from the attorney if we have to be very super specific about these things. I'm sure we have to say how much money, probably $10, $20.
We've had a few other items, and of course I can't speak to his default position is that this general reference to state law, then it doesn't come into conflict with that amount change.
Correct.
So the ordinance thing would help.
Would be a way to handle it. Okay? Rob?
Since we're kind of talking about things that we saw that we might want to address, if you'll turn to section 3.09, it's on page 8. Letter E talks about an emergency ordinance can be introduced at a council meeting, can be adopted or rejected with or without amendment. Then it says the affirmative vote of at least 4 members of the city council shall be required for adoption. I'm thinking that if it's an emergency meeting, that there may not be 6 of us here, maybe we should make that a majority of the members present of the city council rather than make it 4.
Yeah, so if you only had 5 people there. Okay. Okay. I guess then, if there are no other suggestions this evening, we can just start with discussion on Mr. Chesser's recommendations. Starting with section 1.04, it's obvious that that will just have the first sentence struck and probably the third sentence struck if it stays at all. And I chatted with the city secretary earlier, and since this evening we're not going to take any action on anything, some of these things can just be saved up, and it is possible that we can make a lot of adjustments all through our meetings, and then at the end just basically have one motion because we've come to agreement on what we are going to ask of the city council. So unless that becomes a problem, why don't we just proceed with that in mind, at least for tonight? Does that sound okay? Does that make sense? You all agree? Okay. Does anyone want to speak about that? I mean, it seems pretty cut and dried. The next item is section 3.03, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, and he has made several highlighted 2 sections and made a recommendation. Would you like to discuss that at this time? Yes, sir. The city council may annex territory lying adjacent to the city. Wouldn't that be struck? I mean, it cannot. Yes, now, yes, not volunteer. Well, then perhaps can we put in may volunteer, annex voluntarian, I mean, can we have some wording for that?
Yeah, I think his wording here involved that, second to last, the involuntary annexation in the first,
Yes,
et cetera, but if we strike the first line, we would not know.
be able to take anything, okay. So leave that. Thank you. Yes, okay. Yes,
So are you saying delete that first sentence?
no, keep
No.
it.
Oh, keep it. Okay, I
Because
was gonna say-
voluntary annexation is still possible, and as we know, we've recently had several voluntary annexations.
So we'll cross out the line that says involuntary annexation in the
Yes,
first 2 years.
that's the third.
And leave
sentence.
everything else.
Leave everything else.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Section 3.03, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem. Do you guys want me to read this to you, or do you just want to proceed? I'm happy to read it through if you want to have it read now, okay? So to his comments, he says that this came up of whether the Mayor Pro Tem can vote. Came up at the December 30, 2021 council meeting. And so he gave his opinion. He was asked by the council to give an opinion about this as to whether the pro tem retained the right to vote presiding over the council meeting in the mayor's absence, or were they limited to voting only when there was a tie? And based on the various things he says, it's his opinion that the mayor pro tem may vote on a matter before the city council when presiding over a meeting. Well, I know I always did. So he reviewed everything, and he found all these instances to prove his case that the city's minutes reflected that 5 times during 2021, the mayor pro tem had presided over a council in the absence of the mayor. Anyway, he shows all these times, and only 1 time the pro tem did not vote. And so his interpretation of the charter is that the mayor pro tem retains the right to vote on all matters before the council, not just in the event of a tie as for the mayor. So then he talks about how some charters specify that the mayor pro tem retains their right to vote as a council member when presiding at a meeting. And he gives us Kennedale's wording. And I thought that was very good. Does anyone want to talk to that? Rob, would you like to start?
No, I thought that what he put down there was
Excellent.
excellent, yes.
Yeah, I did too.
Okay. So are there any further comments about that? Okay. I thought his recommendation was good, so I think we should be happy to move forward with his recommendation on that.
Right.
I do have one question.
Yes, sir.
Now, with the mayor pro tem, since they do retain their right to vote as a council member, what happens when there's a tie?
Then a tie, if they can't resolve it, typically a tie is then just, the item fails.
Okay.
There is, they would have to bring it back in another way, have further discussion, somebody would have to modify. Tell me, Ms. Russell, if I'm wrong, somebody would have to modify their
Yeah.
motion, or they would have some other ancillary motion and
Just table it and bring it back.
Yeah.
bring it back in a
Exactly.
little bit different way, have to be worded in a different way. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh,
Yes, sir.
Before we leave this 3.03, I'd like to maybe clarify something on the 1, 2, 3, 4th line from the bottom. The sentence starts, should a mayor pro tem not be appointed by city council during the city council meeting in which election results are canvassed and the new elected officials are sworn, the city council may appoint a mayor pro tem at the next regular meeting of the city council by selecting one of its members without the mayor's nomination.
Without the necessity of the mayor's nomination.
I'm saying just cross off necessity of the mayor's nomination. Just make it without the mayor's nomination. Because last time we ran into a bit of a kerfuffle, if you will, because the mayor wanted to make her nomination at the second meeting as well. And as the way I read the charter, if the mayor doesn't get his or her way the first time, at the first meeting, then at the second meeting, it's up to the council to make that decision. So just take out the two words necessity of the, and go with without the mayor's nomination. That'll clear that whole thing up.
That's fine with me. I participated in an instance where we went like 5 weeks without being able to resolve this. And so if there's further discussion or ideas from anyone, but I'm happy to ask for that. It would be much more expedient. So,
Now, would you clarify that again, please?
pardon?
Cheryl, would you clarify that again, please?
So on that line, and it's the sentence before the highlighted part of Mr. Chesser's suggestions, the second highlighted part, where it says, "The city council may appoint a mayor pro tem at the next regular meeting of the city council by selecting one of its members." It says, "without the necessity of the mayor's nomination," but what is being suggested by Mr. Foster is that we should just strike the necessity. So it would just say, "without the mayor's nomination." So strike the three words, "the necessity of," and just go to "without the mayor's nomination."
Okay, thank you.
Okay, further discussion?
I'd like to bring something up in regards to that that's just throwing me off for some reason. So I'm reading this, and because the mayor still is the presiding officer, he or she can still make a decision or run the meeting in a fashion to where it can go her way and doesn't allow the council to make that nomination. So how does that come into effect? And we've already seen that happen as well. So that's why I'm trying to ask for clarification. Does that make sense?
So are we wanting to prevent that kind of thing from happening? You're saying it happened? That the meeting was conducted in such a manner as that nothing was, the item did not come up?
No, the opposite happened. So we went through 5 nominations by the mayor, and which resulted in nobody on council was able to make a nomination because the mayor continued to.
Well, at the first meeting, we've given the power to the mayor.
Correct. I'm talking about the
Are you saying to
second.
strike the mayor's power?
No, I'm not saying that.
The second meeting?
I'm the second meeting, because if we're trying to implement that the city council gets to make the nomination, how do you stop the mayor from making another nomination?
We just took that verbiage out. That's what we just struck.
Well,
was-
I think that the process, the fair process is for there to be nominations. Hopefully, I think I was at some of these meetings, but I think we need to be careful to not, because there has been trouble recently, only focus on that. We need to think of the bigger picture. Does that sound fair?
And I understand that. I'm going from what we've seen and how to correct it, so then that way, one, we don't have that problem in the future, but then it's an easy slate for all of us
Well-
to be able to agree upon, so.
I agree, because in the case that I participated in, it went on and on too. And finally, I was the compromise candidate. But that's the only way we were able to resolve it. So what do you suggest?
I feel like we need to get the attorneys
Some
some measure of language that culminates to the council is the one who will make the nomination on the second meeting, as if the first one did not go through for the mayor, right, for the first meeting.
Well, it says that already.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound clear.
Well, it says, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but should a mayor pro tem not be appointed by the city council during the first meeting, which is when the results are canvassed, and new electors, then the city council may appoint a mayor pro tem at the next meeting of the council by selecting one of its members without the mayor's nomination. That seems to be about as cut and dried as we're ever going to get it.
So at the next meeting, the second meeting, if I understand correctly, let me just restate this, I hope this helps. The mayor announces the item, she puts it forward, but the nomination comes from one of the city council.
All she can do is ask, or he or she can ask for a nomination from the council. Council would say, I nominate James Bells,
And then they vote.
yea or nay. Yep.
And if that doesn't cut it, then they go to,
Right.
The
There may be more
nomination.
than one nomination, I mean, I don't know.
yeah,
But-
but it could be.
But it's all done by the council from that time forward, from the second time
And
forward.
that seems pretty clear. I mean, this can come back up. I'm not saying we should deny you for,
No, and I'm not trying to be,
no.
I'm trying to just, I'm reading it and I'm thinking there's, I don't know, maybe I'm just looking at a loophole that's not really there. I'm just trying to make sure that we cover all the bases here, so.
Okay. Okay. I'm sure that I'll look at this meeting again and take more notes. And Ms. Russell will keep us straight and bring all of our concerns to the attorney. Okay. Moving to the next item. Okay, section 3.05 prohibitions. Subsection C, interference in administrative matters. I have gone to the correct one, haven't I? There's so much discussion that, okay. This deals with in the event of an emergency and in the absence of the city manager, the mayor, or other city council appointed designee will assume the responsibilities of the city manager with approval of the city council. That's what it says in the charter. And Mr. Chesser's comments are, as that you recall, that this was a problem. There was a city manager that resigned, the city was without a city manager. Mayor was appointed by the council to assume responsibility of the city manager, allowing the mayor to serve as acting city manager, not a typical charter provision. Notice he says not a typical charter provision. And it seemed to me that it was ambiguous previously in the charter as I read it. I read it over several times. So he tells us what the problem is. It's conflicting role of the mayor. She would be, he or she would be answering to the city council as well as serving the city council. So it has caused conflicts. He brought in language from the city of Allen. The city manager may, by letter filed with the city secretary, designate a qualified city employee to exercise the powers and perform the duties of city manager during the city manager's temporary absence. To perform the duties of city manager during an absence of disability exceeding 30 days, the council may by resolution appoint an officer of the city to perform the duties of the city manager until the city manager shall return or such disability shall cease. In case of absence, disability, or illness exceeding 30 days, where the duties of the city manager should not be performed properly, the city manager's salary may be continued at the discretion of the council. Okay, so do you want tweaks in this? Do you want something more specific, less specific? I think it's a good idea for there to be on record or somebody suggested by the city manager, because certainly that would be the person who would know who is best in touch. And I'm sure this wouldn't be made lightly. So let's just start any discussion we may have over with Rob.
Well, my only concern with this part from Mr. Chesser is that it talks about the city manager may by letter filed with the city secretary designate a city employee. And this is just worst case scenario, but what if something tragic happened to our city manager, and he didn't have the time or the wherewithal to write the letter to the city secretary? So I feel like there's in our, already in our charter, it says, in the event, the very last sentence is, in the event of an emergency and in the absence of the city manager, I would say the city council appointed designee will assume the responsibility, and then go into what Mr. Chesser brought from the other city. If it's 30 days, then so be it. But I want to have something in there in the event that we,
Right.
in between the 0 and 30 days.
So a provision for, you said right, did I hear you, Gwen? Or I thought I heard somebody comment. So you want a provision for the worst-case scenario injected in there somewhere?
Exactly.
Could it not be that the council would choose or nominate the person to take over?
Yeah, so that's why I want the sentence left that's in our charter already that says, in the event of an emergency, in the absence of the city manager, cross out the mayor and just say, a city council appointed designee will assume the responsibility of the city manager with approval by the city council. I don't even know why I would say with approval.
And if it
So
has,
it
Designate the
says,
person.
right now it says, or city council appointed designee will assume. So you're saying, in the event of an emergency and in the absence of the city manager, the city council
Right.
will appoint a designee to assume the responsibility of the city manager with approval by the city council.
That
So
seems
there
kind
would
of
be a
redundant,
city
though. If
council?
that seems kind of redundant if the city council appoints somebody and then we got to approve them,
Okay.
you know?
Yes.
yeah.
So might want to clear that verbiage up a little bit as well.
But would that require the council to do it, to have an emergency meeting? For them to appoint someone?
Good. Good.
Because then, you know, it should have something in there that an emergency meeting can be called in the council to appoint someone.
Over in the section about emergency meetings, we're emergency,
It's on page 7.
yeah.
That would just fall under the category of a special meeting.
So it's under special meetings. I'm turning.
Would that require the 72-hour posting, though, for something like that?
Well, emergency, you don't, isn't it 2 hours?
Yeah,
An imminent threat
right,
to the health of the public.
right.
So we need something in this that covers that.
Well, you can have a special meeting, which is under section 308, subsection C,
Yes.
and it says here that by 4 council members, but I think we've changed it to 2, or we'll probably address that when we get there.
Changed it to do by ordinance. Well, because that's out of, yeah.
Does that also cover that if there's a disaster and something happens to him, then they need to be able to have an emergency meeting? They wouldn't have time to post anything.
Well, that would probably fall under the emergency meeting, but as Ms. Russell said, it's going to have to be a real emergency, which
Right.
if something happened to the city manager, it would probably be.
Well, not according to the state, though.
So
True.
you're saying is in this, while we keep this city council appointed designee there, you also have to have, you want to refer to the emergency meetings. or
Because
the
there's not a reference to an emergency meeting in the meetings part. It only refers to, you can, if you're going to declare emergency, which would be like, you know, a tornado, I mean, we're wiped out by a tornado or something that's the welfare of the city's at stake. So it might not be a bad idea to put in there that council will convene to designate their person, you know, within 24 hours or, you know, some, if it's in the charter, we can do it, right? Ms. Secretary?
From the look on her face, no.
Could you also have in there that one of the, like the fire chief or the police chief, one would take over in the place of city manager until one could be appointed by the council?
We're talking, yes, sir.
The mayor is the emergency
Emergency.
management officer for the city.
but we're kind of classifying the loss of our city manager as an emergency.
But we're talking about
That's-
two things here, and one is the city manager not being able to, we didn't have one. It wasn't an emergency, he resigned. It was an emergency as far as the city was concerned and the council, but we had a resignation. That wasn't like a tornado, hurricane, or some such thing.
Right.
Don't you go anywhere.
I guess what we need help on with this, and because there's several things have come up, it is an emergency. It says in the event of an emergency and in the absence of the city manager. So they're talking about two things here. But when we lost our city manager previously, we did not also experience an emergency. So this, in the event of an emergency and in the absence of the city manager, it's two things, an emergency and absence of the city manager. So we need some clarification on both of those items. Yes. So as far as operations go, it was a minor emergency. And I don't use minor lightly. I'm just saying it wasn't. Okay. Do you want to add more? Anybody want to add more to that specific part of it? So
Hang on,
what
if
he's
you-
given us is good, but we want more. We want the assignment of who is in charge to be clarified more specifically.
I think what the attorney has written there is quite acceptable and right on the money.
See, you're right. We are kind of looking at two different things. Because if it's a state of emergency, then the mayor becomes in charge,
Yes.
according to section 3.10.
Well, she's not the incident commander or anything, but she is in charge.
Oh, but it says, whenever conditions threaten to render inadequate the normal procedures of the city for protection, a state of emergency may be declared by vote of the council or by order of the mayor, or in the mayor's absence, the mayor pro tem, if the council can't be convened within a certain, at the time available. So
We need
we-
some help
Yeah.
from the attorney on this one.
I think we should take out in the event of an emergency.
Think about this.
Yes, we need more time to think about
Move
this.
on.
Yes, to the next
We
item.
need to have these meetings in the morning when our minds are.
Well, my notes are becoming very, okay, think about it.
Sure.
This is in reference to interference in administrative matters.
Yes, it's not in case of emergency.
That's why I think we should just take out that verbiage in the event of an emergency and just state in the
In
absence of the
absence
city
of
manager, blah, blah, blah.
And in the absence of the city manager, the city council will assume the no,
The city council appointed
city
designee.
council appointed designee.
Yeah.
So we are in agreement to accept this part of the highlighted part. In the absence of the city manager, the city council appointed designee will assume the responsibility of the city manager with the approval of the city council. I know you think it's redundant. We're saying appointed designee,
But if that's the way the attorney wants to say it, I'm fine with that.
okay, but we're going
We're
to ask
quibble
for it
over
to be
that.
cleared up, and then go ahead and add at least part of what came from Alan about the remuneration and all of that. Okay. Section 3.06.
Hang on, before we leave that section?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'd really like some clarification on letter A. I've read that, reread that, and
Are we going back to this part in the charter? Not
Yeah.
his,
3.05, letter, just, since we're still on 3.05, yes.
and
and probably, I'm a little thick, but I don't think we need to address that now, but I'd just like the attorney to clean that up a little. It's really unclear to me what they're shooting for.
Well, they're saying that within so many years, you can't hold
Right,
a paid position.
right, I know that.
Yeah, but take the lawyer language out of it and
Yeah.
make it simple,
Right, bring it down to, exactly.
in essence.
Okay.
Says you can't be appointed, you can't hold any public office, any other public office except notary public, member of the National Guard or military reserve, public office which may be appointed because said office is required to be filled by a member of the legislative body of the city. This latter provision is specifically designed to validate appointments such as memberships in regional boards, blah, 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 which require that representatives be appointed from each member city or jurisdiction. Sure to goodness, we can make that say, you can't be appointed to something within 2 years.
And you can't have done this, this, and this.
Yes.
Okay.
That's all I'm asking.
I'm going to ask for some clarification on what we just talked about. In the attorney's comments, where he's right in the very beginning sentence, he says, "City manager may, by letter filed." Did we scratch that? Is that in essence what we just kind of decided?
The city manager what?
Where the first sentence that he states that he got from the city of Allen, he says, "The city manager may, by letter filed." Did we decide to scratch that in lieu of what we are
No.
trying to accomplish, or are we leaving that part in?
No,
Sorry, I'm just trying to clarify.
we wanted to keep that, but then Rob brought up, what if being without the city manager is a horrible thing, like the demise of the city manager? He's not going to have time to write a letter because he's not with us anymore.
Right.
So he wanted to go back to this other to make sure that the council, we didn't strike the highlighted part previously that the council would appoint a designee, but for the city manager to have a letter making his suggestions, his or her suggestions, is also a good idea. There would be a little bit of
Right.
time in there, perhaps the 72 hours, for some of these things to take place, and we don't want it to look as interference, so that a letter would be presented. Or maybe it wouldn't be, because after all, the city manager is in charge of he answers to the council, but everybody else answers to him.
Okay. The only question I had in light of that is maybe there's another way to write it by way of what he's got there, by saying, by letter filed with the city secretary, or, and then refer back to something that Rob was mentioning in that previous statement. The kind of combination of both of those paragraphs to be a little bit more substantial, if that makes sense.
Okay. I'm not going to try to restate it. I'm going to leave it up to the city secretary to get with the attorney.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to confer with him and see if he
Yes.
can mesh
Come
them.
back with something good for us.
Yeah, mesh it up, mash it up, and make sure that it all runs congruent.
Okay. Anything else, or can we move forward to the next item? Okay. Section 3.06, vacancies and forfeiture of office, subsection B.
I like what the attorney put there, without consent of the council.
Exactly.
But I'm wondering if there wouldn't be wisdom in, just going to throw this out there, in another reason for forfeiture of office would be repeated violations of the code of conduct. What does the commission feel about that?
Does anyone else want to address that?
You mean, I'd like a unit there about, another reason for forfeiture would be
Right.
3 or 4 actions against the code of conduct.
Since I just said repeated, since the letter C says the city council will be the final judge in matters involving
Yes.
forfeiture of office. So
Right.
if the council decided that it took, hey, this was the last straw, that would be my suggestion there.
That'd be a good point to also inject, violation of code of ethics.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
either or both of those.
Make that,
Yeah.
sections, or bullet point 7.
Code of ethics is actually in the code of conduct.
Okay.
So are you wanting to add that to be forfeiture of office and then? you
Yes.
Put
It
items
should be
7
in
and
here in the
8
charter,
maybe?
correct?
Yeah, so number 7 would become repeated violations of the code of conduct.
To determine by the council?
Well, then, letter C says the council be the final judge
Okay.
in matters involving it, so it would be ultimately decided by the council.
Now, we do need an absolute number. What would be
Yes,
declared as
I agree.
violation?
I don't think so, because if the council decided that it was, because there again, you're going to get into, okay, was this a violation or was it not? You know, I mean, there's so many gray areas. If you put an absolute number down there, then it's just kind of like, well, you got one more shot, Mr. Mayor, and, oh, that was almost on the line, you're done. But if they say, hey, it's repeated, it's going to be a judgment call anyway. And so that's why I'm saying, just let's say repeated and not do 4 or 3 or whatever.
But couldn't you have like maybe 3 refractions, because it might be something small, but then have wording in there to where if the council decides that it's something that is more serious or more major, 1?
Let's find out what the logistics of it is.
Okay.
And I think we need to make sure that if we're gonna be able to put that language in there, then it can't conflict with the part of the charter that talks about recalls and things like that, because there has to be an order and procedures for that as well. So, and
There
that's,
is. There is already.
I know it's in there, I just,
We're going to clean that up too, so
yeah.
that's all I had.
Would anyone else like to comment on this? Inject some of their words?
Now, do we have a process for removing somebody? I mean, is it a disciplinary hearing or?
It's just a vote of the council, see you bye.
Okay.
Since you're elected officials, it's not quite the same as employees, where you would have those types of things. Is it in the code of conduct? I have it here. I was going to pull it out, and then I'm like, our discussion here tonight is not about the code of conduct. This is an ordinance.
There's a form online that we fill out, you have to be submitted to the city secretary, notarized. It has to be very specific about what the violation is or complaints. But the complaint is saying which violations of the code is happening. And then it would go to the council and the attorney for consideration and discussion, and then
So there is a procedure in place in the ordinance.
Definitely.
I read this 2 weeks ago. You would think I would know what it said.
But if I understand correctly, when the attorney was here, we're talking about the code of conduct, he also said there's really no enforcement of the code of conduct. I think what Rob's trying to do is put it in the charter, so there is enforcement.
And find out if that can be put in the charter and enforced.
Well, if
Take
it's
it
voted
away.
for by the citizens, it goes in.
Yes, taking it away as just an ordinance. So in that case, in this case, maybe the charter is a better idea than an ordinance. So is this?
Why can't it be both places?
Well, it can,
With the code of conduct, we would have a mechanism of determining if there was a breach of that code of conduct.
but that doesn't mean that they are kicked out, just means they're in breach.
Right now, there's no sanction, there's no, if someone violates the code of conduct, is not even a slap on the wrist. The most we can do is censure that person by saying that, hey, council's very upset, blah, blah, blah. But there's no way to remove that person for repeated offenses. So that's why I wanted to put that in the charter, that, hey, there now is teeth in this code of conduct. We all have to conduct ourselves by that
Exactly.
code.
Okay. We'll keep on to find out more about it.
And I have one question for you. This
Yes.
charter, anything that we change in here or tweak or whatever, it applies to all the like type A board, type B board, any of the commissions,
Well, the code of conduct applies to all of us.
the charter and the code of
Yes.
conduct both.
I guess, and that's why you wanted us to sign the paper that we had read it. It applies to all of us, too.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, section 3.08, meetings of the city council, subsection C. The charter says that special meetings may be called by the city secretary on the written request of the mayor or for. Okay, so did you say earlier, Mr. Bells, that this has been changed by an ordinance? Because it's on special meetings on 4 city council members?
We discussed changing it, and was it in the rules of procedure or the code of conduct?
It's in the rules of procedure.
The two, yeah.
But the rules of procedure are just your rules for the city council, they aren't an ordinance?
Correct. So we need to make it in the charter
Yeah.
that it's 2, so that we don't violate the
Okay.
quorum, the walking quorum.
Right.
So by state law, then we're out of compliance, so we would just clarify that. Are you happy with his comments and what his suggestions are? He addresses that we're out of compliance with the state law, so it has to be less than quorum, and that's okay. It says here, members may call a special called meeting in addition to the mayor. So can the special called meeting still be called just only by the mayor, at the mayor's request too?
Are you in the charter or are you in his comments?
I'm in his comments. So I just
Oh, in the
wanted,
charter, it says too, that on the written request of the mayor or any 4 city council.
so it would stay on the request of the mayor or any two?
2, exactly.
Okay, so the mayor still retains the right to call a special meeting, of course,
Right.
for instance, like in the case we discussed earlier.
Exactly.
Okay. Section 5.01, city manager, subsection A1.
Do we want to address that 3.09 before we go too far past it? The one I brought up about the majority as opposed to 4 on 309-E, not letter E?
Did I skip over it?
Well, we just talked about it earlier, but I just wanted to, section E says the affirmative vote of at least 4 members of the city council shall be required for adoption, talking about an emergency ordinance. If we don't have 6 people present, then you couldn't vote a majority. So I just want to say,
So, but if you don't have a quorum at all, then you can't even have the meeting, correct? So you would have to have at least 5 people there.
well, but then 4 could be a quorum, that's over half. 4 could be a quorum.
Oh.
So
4
then
is,
you gotta be anonymous,
4 is the quorum.
unanimous.
Anonymous.
Gotta be, yeah. I'm just saying, making a majority, instead of making the number 4, just make it a majority of the members shall be required for adoption. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. That sounds good. I thought we already had that down, so maybe you already had it, yeah, okay. Okay, section 5.01, city manager. Except as otherwise provided in this charter, the city manager shall be responsible for and have powers to appoint, suspend, lay off, demote, and/or remove all or any one of the directors or heads of administrative departments. No director or head of any administrative department, however, shall be appointed or removed without prior notice and consultation of the city council. Also, I just want to point out that in section 3.05, prohibitions, B, appointments and removals, it also covers this. So there are two places, I think we have to go back and look at that also when we talk about this. His comments are the highlighted language is ambiguous as to the city council's role in the appointment and/or removal of department heads. It does not give the council the right to disapprove or approve the appointment or removal of a department head. It might be beneficial to amend this provision to clarify the roles of the city manager and the city council as to the appointment and/or removal of department heads. So he says to clarify, but he doesn't give us any suggestions on clarification. So that is either up to us or we have to get him in here to be more specific with us. Do you feel that have you guys all looked at 3.05 B and C and perhaps that clarifies it more?
So one thing that comes to my mind is, since we're going back to C, says, neither the city council nor any member shall give an order either publicly or privately to any subordinate of the city manager. What about an implicit order? My suggestion is we say neither publicly or privately, implicitly or explicitly. Because we had kind of a gray area situation come up in one of our council meetings this year where it was an implicit order was given to remove someone, but it wasn't exactly stated as an order. Right? What does the commission feel about that?
You're
I
talking,
think it should
Okay,
be,
we went back to 3.05
yeah.
C.
C.
Oh, you're going down to
Because that has
C.
to do with
Okay.
prohibitions, and that addressed, you know, they're saying no direct or head of any, so we're talking about 5.01, the city manager and the city manager's powers, but we're also talking about removals, and it seems that they're connected. So since we went back to that, Rob would like to add implicitly, explicitly, and/or implicitly in those things, either publicly or privately, giving orders.
What do y'all think?
Any discussion?
I think he's right. I think he's right on that, and it needs to be added in.
Okay. So back to then the city managers and the city manager's responsibilities and clarification of the roles of the city manager and the city council. You know, sometimes too much clarification restricts in a way that you're sorry for later. So I'm fine with how it is, but perhaps not everyone else is.
Well, you've got the part there where he says "or." under his recommendations, the city council shall be notified anytime a director or any administrative department head is appointed or removed.
I'll remove.
I think the general consensus among the current council is, we're not trying to interfere with the removal, we just want to know. We don't want to, I'll use the cliche, we don't want to read it in the paper.
Yes. So, do you want further clarification of roles, or just leave it as it is? You know, that's what we're here to consider. Now, we're not going to make a motion or anything on this tonight, but going forward, do you want them to talk to the attorney about this more specifically, or, you know, do you want to discuss this further? No one?
So what are we going to go with? Is it going to say, no director or head of any administrative department, however, shall be appointed or removed without notice to the city council?
Well, sometimes you have to take care of business right away. I guess.
Well, that's why I'm saying, I'm fine with that, as long as you let us know. I mean, I'm not saying prior, remove prior for sure. Just appointed or removed without notice to the council, so
Well,
that you at least notify.
Mr. City Manager, you have the ability to suspend somebody for the day or a week or whatever, correct? To send them home or whatever while you get with your council and say, this has happened and I'm going to do this.
I read removed as, well, and I think sent home is different than removed.
Yes,
Well, then,
yes.
say terminated then.
So I would read this kind of from the council notes, that no director or head of any administrative department, however, shall be appointed or shall be removed without notice to the city council. So that was the notes from the council.
Leaving out prior notice.
Correct.
Leaving out prior.
Just prior.
Prior and leaving out and consultation of, that was again from the council.
What about appointment?
It's good.
Appointed or removed is on there, so.
Right, but you didn't say appointed when you just said,
Yeah, that's in red, I don't think it's struck.
Yeah, it's,
That was never just really decided upon when y'all were speaking about it at the council.
oh,
So that's why there's the keep or remove the appointed.
okay. Well, then if you want to worry about suspending somebody for the day, why don't we say, shall be appointed or terminated without notice to the council? That way you can suspend them for the day, or,
They have a situation where you remove them from their current duties, you remove them from their rank,
yeah,
example,
yeah,
so that can come up.
or reassigned.
Yeah.
You say appoint, reassign, or terminate. We just want to know.
We need to be
That's- I
sure
kinda
that we
like
leave
Mr.
people
Bell's.
with the power to do their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely, but I just want to be
But
notified
as
of it. So we don't
James
see it on
says, you don't want to
Facebook.
read about it on the paper.
That
Yes,
waste book, what do we call it?
waste book.
I got a question about notification to the council. Is it simple as just shooting an official email?
That is what I've done in the past.
Yeah.
That works?
So, yes.
Mhm.
So you want, so we're talking about striking prior,
Right,
and what else? Wasn't there a second word?
yeah, so say appointed, reassigned,
Or
or
removed.
terminated.
Appointed, reassigned.
he put the sentence right there at the end, that is good. The city council shall be notified at any time a director or administrative department head is appointed or removed. So wouldn't we strike then the sentence in the charter that says no director or head, that entire sentence, and replace it with this one that he's,
His sentence, read his sentence again. You're saying no director or head of any administrative department, however, shall be appointed. That be struck.
Right. And put, city council shall be. Sorry, the city council shall be notified at any time a director or administrative department head is appointed or removed.
Okay. Section 5.01, city manager, subsection D. Feels like it's the same thing again, doesn't it? In the absence or disability of the city manager, the city council appointed designee will perform the duties of the office with the approval of the city council. No worries about this with any. Okay, section 6.116, borrowing. Certificates of obligation. The city council shall have the power to issue certificates of obligation in accordance with the laws of the state of Texas if prior to the date tentatively set for the authorization of the issuance of the certificates, a petition signed by 15% of the registered voters of the city is filed with the city secretary protesting the issuance of such certificates for such purpose. They shall not issue unless the issuance thereof is approved at an election held and conducted in the manner provided for bond elections by the laws of the state of Texas. So evidently, Attorney Brown offered the option of removing everything after the first process is set forth in the state law. And Mr. Chesser is saying the provision conflicts with the state law. So I think this is fine. Does anybody else want to talk about it?
Go with the suggestion, just the first sentence and strike out the rest.
Yeah.
That works.
And just
Conform.
put it in the state law.
Yeah.
Oh, I did wonder, when it says, is it clear the petition is signed by 15% of the registered voters of the city? I wish we could like put that in bold somehow so that everybody would see that and understand that. Because
Well, but in his comments below, he talks about state law that says 5%.
5%, well, even if it just says 5%,
Well, it's covered by state law.
you're right. Okay, form of ballots,
So that would be changed to 5% rather than
5%,
15?
because they're going to put in the state law there.
Okay,
The first sentence, like,
makes sense.
yes, I think that's what we were going to suggest is only the first sentence would be left and then it's state law.
You know, the last sentence before the comments in red, it says, "and conducted in manner provided for bond elections by the laws of the state of Texas."
Yes,
We need to leave that,
leave that,
Yep,
I would imagine.
okay.
I think so too.
And maybe they'll say we have to state the whole state law in here in our charter, or just refer to it, so whatever they tell us is legal, since this is provided by state law. Okay,
Wouldn't that be like repeating yourself if you put that last sentence, because we've already stated it's covered?
What if this repeats itself?
Huh?
The one right above it's repeating itself back in the charter.
okay. Section 10.09, form of ballots, subsection B and C, repeal. Okay, what they're saying is where it says repeal, it should say referendum. Do I have this correct? And in C, where it says referendum, it should say recall. Okay, do you want to call for? Does anyone have comments about this repeal and referendum thing? It just looks to me like sort of a housekeeping correction, that it was, we need better terminology. Yes, just change the words, that's all it refers to. Okay. Going on to section 10.07. Certification of petitions and presentations to the city council. Subsection A, section 10, and section 10.11, limitations and restrictions, subsection A. Okay, 10.07A, within 10 days after the petition is presented, the city secretary shall complete a certificate of sufficiency or insufficiency. Sufficiency shall be determined by compliance to section 10.03 and section 10.04 of this article. Now, I'm sure if y'all did your homework, you went back and you read all of these things. And section 10.11A says, no recall petition shall be filed against any official of the city within 6 months after being elected, or within 6 months of such a petition being filed with the city secretary pursuant to section 10.05 and found insufficient by the city secretary, or if applicable, found insufficient by the city council pursuant to section 10.07. A new petition for recall cannot be resubmitted within 1 year after an election for such official recall. Okay, his comments. As you will recall, these provisions became an issue when a petitioner's committee affidavit was filed with the city secretary to recall the mayor. Following the filing of the first affidavit, no petition for recall was ever filed or presented to the city secretary for the recall of the mayor. Less than 6 months later, a subsequent petitioner's committee affidavit was filed with the city secretary. The mayor alleged that the city secretary violated the city charter on 2 counts. 1, by failing to certify the initial petition insufficient by the 10-day deadline, and 2, by the acceptance of a second recall petition a mere 5 days after the initial period ended to submit a petition. Then he gives us his interpretation of section 10.07. A, that there is no petition presented to the city secretary, therefore there was nothing for her to certify as sufficient or insufficient. The city secretary's duties under section 10.07A require her to, within 10 days after the petition is presented to her, complete a certificate of sufficiency or insufficiency after determining compliance with section 10.03 and section 10.04 of Article 10. Although section 10.05B requires that the recall petition be filed with the city secretary no later than 30 days after the filing of the petitioner's committee affidavit, this is simply the deadline for the recall petition to be filed with the city secretary for her to consider it. If it is not filed with her, there is nothing to deem sufficient or insufficient. The city secretary cannot force the filing of a recall petition with her office. It's my interpretation of section 10.11A that there was never a recall petition filed with the city secretary to be found insufficient by the city secretary, or if applicable, the city council. Therefore, there is no prohibition against filing the subsequent petitioner's committee affidavit. Section 10.11.A of the city's charter provides that no recall petition shall be filed against any official within 6 months after such a petition being filed with the city secretary pursuant to section 10.05 and found insufficient by the city secretary, or if applicable, found insufficient by the city council pursuant to section 10.07. The charter distinguishes between a petitioner's committee affidavit and a petition, both of which have different requirements. The prohibition contained in section 10.11A prohibits the filing of a recall petition within 6 months of a previous recall petition being filed with the city secretary. Although the current provisions governing recall are workable, in my opinion, the city council may consider amending the charter provisions governing recall by eliminating the requirement of filing of a petitioner's affidavit to simplify the recall process. This would have the added benefit of eliminating the ability of petitioners filing multiple petitioners' committee affidavits with the city secretary to start the recall process, but never presenting a petition for recall that is subject to the recall restrictions contained in section 10.11A. Okay. I just want to state before we discuss this that I think we need to remember that all elected officials serve at the pleasure of the voters. And that should never be forgotten. And I've written that in my notes more than once. And I'll just say right now that I don't know why we would want to limit the filing of a petitioner's committee affidavit. I see this as sort of a check and a balance. So with that, that's where I stood on this. And let's just start over here with Rob.
Let's start with someone else on that. Maybe Mrs. Gillen would like
Okay.
to
I
weigh in
certainly
on
would. Since I got the first petition and the information that we were required to follow was incorrect, we were told that on our petition we had to get a certain percentage of the registered voters, which was 12,500 something in the area, or 6,500. I can't remember the exact numbers right now. However, when it came right down to it, there was only a small percentage that we had to get rather than that many. And so the petition was not turned in, was not filed, and a second one was started. And it ended up not being filed, not being turned in, because the people felt that the mayor was complying and had mentioned that, you know, it seemed like she was going to be working with council rather than trying to recall our council. And so we felt, for the betterment of our city, that we would withdraw it. And so that is what we did. So it did not get filed. And I think that there should be some kind of wording in here that, you know, on a recall like that, they should have some kind of instructions on exactly how you would go about doing that. Because
So-
we had wrong information to begin with, and that's why it was pulled and another one was started.
So what the charter says, let me just see if this is what you're expressing. What the charter says is fine, but the instructions that were given for the process that you were given were not clear or incorrect.
They were not clear. There was no actual instructions on how to go about doing the entire thing.
Well,
And so it meant that myself had to keep communicating, trying to get more instructions, and was given different information, and I even called another attorney, my attorney, to ask them, you know, what is the process here, because this is not what it seems like it should be. So I just think more instructions should be there. If there's any kind of a recall, there should be more instructions on the people who are doing the recall. I don't care if it's the mayor on the council or people on the mayor, but it should have had more instructions about council people not being able to go out and knock on doors. You know, there should be some kind of regulations there on how this process took place.
would some of that be also in state law about who can and can't? I would think so. So even though our charter, I mean, as to who could go and go around with petitions, some of that would be clarified by state law. And so that doesn't necessarily need to be in our charter, but whoever is handing out the instructions needs to be well-versed in that. Okay? And then the instructions need to be clear. So that's not necessarily a charter. That's good historical information about what has happened here and why this has come up.
Right, exactly.
Okay?
Exactly. I don't think it should be on the charter, but I do think that we do need to be a little more clear on the things we're doing so people don't do the wrong thing.
Okay? Rob?
I also kind of wonder about the necessity of having a minimum of 200 signatures on the petition, because if you look at the information that Mr. Knott provided us with, there were 782 votes were the most that were cast for any particular.
In 2022.
2022, yes.
Which would have been the previous election that
Yes.
the numbers were based on.
So, but 30% of 700, well, that's 200, isn't it? My bad.
Yeah.
Go away.
Yeah, and see, we were told 30% of the registered voters, not the ones who actually voted.
Again, that number is not addressed in this information anywhere. That, I assume, is the state law that governs it. You guys don't be fooling around.
I just think that there may be some time when you wouldn't have, there may be only 400 people that voted.
Oh, yes, in off years, especially non-presidential years,
Right.
I've seen years like that.
So, but we still require 200 signatures on the petition to get a recall.
So I
Maybe
thought,
we should just leave it at 30% of the registered voters who voted and cut the 200 out.
Yeah, because when we looked, when I did the research on it, you know, we had more than enough signatures to begin with on the first one.
Right.
However, when I checked, half of those people had not voted. They were just registered voters.
they were registered.
Right, they were registered to vote, they had not
Yeah.
voted. And so there's a big difference there in the numbers.
Wasn't that where the mix-up was? It wasn't clear,
Yes.
clear if it was 30% of the registered voters, or if it was 30%, whatever percent it was, of the
registered
people that voted in the last election.
Exactly.
And do we have to go only to the people who voted in the last election?
Yes.
No.
That's
I
what-
thought it was just a percentage of the number that voted in the
That was
last
what was
election that were registered voters.
It was presented that it had to be the people who had voted in.
It had to be the people that
Right.
voted in the last
It
election.
says here, containing the signature of registered voters equal in number to 30% of the total number of the qualified voters that voted in the last election. So if 200 people who are registered voters of the city, whether they voted or not,
Yes.
it doesn't say that they had to have voted, it just says that they are registered voters, and then the numbers,
The benchmark was
200 or
figured by
30%.
how many voted in that
Exactly.
last election.
Yeah.
What section is that, Rob?
10.05,
Okay, Mr. Battle?
A, or A.
Yes. Okay.
That's fine, yeah.
Okay.
But if not, I would like to take the 200 minimum out. If that doesn't conflict with Texas law.
And so do a percentage rather than a number.
And is it going to be people who voted or
Just like it says,
just registered voters?
just registered voters. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yep.
But that percentage is figured on the number of voters at the last election.
Right.
Which is the number that voted.
Yes. Okay. So basically, you can call the elections office, Johnson County, they tell you that number, and so then you can say, this is how many you're going to have. So there was really a miscommunication. It appears. There was a lot of confusion. Okay. Any other thoughts on this from anyone? I don't want anyone to feel like they didn't have their opportunity to speak. Yes, ma'am.
For, in 10.5A, there's a petition for something completely different that also has that 200.
Right.
Strike it there as well?
Yes.
Was that a petition on the
Referendum.
referendum? Yeah.
So the city attorney, in his last remarks on this, and I believe he is referencing section 10.11. He's kind of making it, I don't want to say clear, but he's saying that we should look at, he says this would have the added benefit of eliminating the ability of petitioners filing multiple petitioners' committees, affidavits with the city secretary. So he's kind of insinuating that we should be looking at that, and I know you kind of,
I don't like that, but you guys certainly can all speak up, and the majority will take the floor, take it in at the end of the day. But my point is that you have to remember that the elected officials always serve at the pleasure of the voters. And to restrict being able to do the affidavit, to me, is restricting the voters. In other words, it's giving all the power then to this side of the dais instead of to the voters. There could be a petition that is motivated by a totally different thing that a group wants to come and, form the committee and file an affidavit. And so I think that our thinking is being skewed somewhat by recent history, but not the big picture. That's how I felt about it when I read that. I didn't feel good about that suggestion, but I put it out there so y'all would talk about it some more.
Yeah, I'm just bringing up the language that he's mentioning because he knows the history as well, so he's trying to do some
Expedite.
cause and effect.
He's
It-
trying to expedite it and cause it to not be as confusing and messy.
Yeah.
But, tell me what you think. You are.
Well, I mean, here, I'll give you my 2 cents on that. So I'm looking at it from the fact that maybe you have a disgruntled citizen, and I mean, we're not naming names, so just one person who's disgruntled that wants to file something, and they keep doing it over and over and over, and whether they get the 20 votes to start the petition or not, they're allowed to just keep filing that, and it's a repetitive thing that the city secretary is just being hassled, more or less, and it's almost more of a harassment. So I'm looking at what the attorney's writing, and I'm thinking in my mind, I'm thinking he's trying to solve a problem as far as harassment towards a certain council person from continuing. Does that make sense?
I'm sure that that's his motivation.
But if it never gets turned in to the city secretary, it just goes dead.
Correct, but the ability, I guess what the attorney is insinuating is the effectual, he or she gets to turn in an affidavit continually, like he or she can just keep doing it over and over and over. The same person.
Well, you
Yes,
can't
but
turn it,
if they get the 20 people to form the committee and they go out and they collect the signatures, it's valid. And I've seen things that are put up on, referendums, whatever, they come back and they come back and they come back, like redistricting. It comes back and it comes back and it comes back, and then finally it passes. Now, was that a harassment, or was that a true reflection of the population? Or, there's a lot of discussion out there about that, and I know that's not really a very good example, but it does come back and come back. And that's part of what we get to have in our form of government, is we get to bring it back, tweak it a little bit, make it a different, it's not quite the same, item on the agenda, but you're bringing it back because it's not over. You feel like that you are representing, and that's part of our system. You don't want to restrict that.
And I understand that. I think the culmination of all three of those parts that we're kind of dealing with, 10.05, 7, and 10.11, I think the attorney needs to give us the meat of what he's thinking there, so then that way we can make a better decision.
Think about that too.
well, and as he said, there's 6 months in between and different things. And at the time of this other one, there was confusion. There wasn't enough clarity, there wasn't enough instructions on it, or anything else. And I can't see, I would really like to meet somebody that would like to do that over and over and over and over again, because it's not fun.
I bet we can find some
Maybe he can give us some clarification next week
clarification on it.
on that section.
Yes.
Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. Maybe when someone wants to file a petition, that we'll just give them the number of signatures you have to have.
Exactly.
And it can be from any pool it has to be just a registered voter of the city of Keene, and interpret this charter for them, write it in something that, a typical layperson can understand, and that would eliminate all of the confusion and all of the
Exactly.
struggle.
More clarity and more
I
instruction.
mean, I've
The
read this thing.
instructions are better.
Yes. I think it's pretty clear in the charter what the intent of the recall was. It was just that there was misinformation from the person who was passing out the petitions.
Yes, but we're also talking about how often then you can file the affidavit to even get the petition started. It's a two-part thing. First, you
Right.
have to have the 20 people
Right.
to go and file that affidavit of your intent to start the petition. And then you go and your 20 people or whomever go out. They have to have signed that petition, if I understand correctly. that affidavit. They
Yeah.
have to be that 20 people, and they collect the signatures to get the number or the percentage or whatever.
Exactly, that first one
I
has to
don't
be filed.
I'm fine with
The
them-
discussion is limiting how many times, they're talking about just eliminating that affidavit things. Is that correct? Or limiting how often you can do?
go out to get signatures, right? And they don't get enough, so they just simply don't turn it in.
Right, and then it isn't certified.
They go over and over and over and over. I think that's what he's trying to address.
Well, I know that's what he's trying to address, but I think you can't truly avoid that if you want to allow people an opportunity to be heard if they feel like some wrong is being done.
Well, and at that time, too, there was a mutual agreement to withdraw, both sides. And so, you know, why would you want to turn it in then? And one thing that somewhere in our code of conduct, in our something here, we have a particular Keene pest, I'll call it, who loves to put things on Facebook, which is untrue, about how things are and everything. And it makes it impossible for, if you turn in paperwork, then you've got the name of citizens who, in good faith, wanted to sign the petition to get it on the ballot to where all of the citizens could go out then and vote for what they wanted to do. And he made it or that person, Pest, made it to where it was impossible for you to keep people safe and not harassed and not degraded and everything else on Facebook. And so that was one of the reasons for, first of all, the confusion. The second thing is we withdrew it because we thought everything was settled to where our mayor was going to, you know, get along with our council and everything was fine. We were happy about that. We were glad to withdraw it. Then theirs got withdrawn. And so it should have settled down. It should have been fine. But those names, they wanted those names of those people who had signed. There was no need for it. It wasn't going to be filed. You know, it just needs to be clear.
It wasn't filed, so it wasn't, what is the term here? Is it certified? It wasn't certified. And so the names did not become part of the public record, I guess.
Only the 20 that you filed.
Only the 20?
Only the 20 that you filed on each committee.
20, okay. So
And those people were called and
perhaps
harassed.
we need further clarification on this whole process from the attorney.
I think he's given you his clarification right here.
Yeah, but
Let me finish. He doesn't want to deal with this. He wants this charter commission to deal with it, and we should. We don't need to kick the can down the road to him.
so,
Well, the sad part was, it wasn't only one recall, because there was 3 other things going on all at the same time. And it was just a total mess, and you're right, it was played out on Facebook way too much, as most things are. And so whatever it takes to clarify it in here, so hopefully this city will never go through that again.
so let's just go around. Do you want to get rid of the affidavit process?
Well,
Well, I
question-
think we should just wait till next week and let him tell us again. Maybe he's got gives us some more insight, but
No, we were just discussing tonight and not really making
Right.
any decisions until then,
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
so.
One thing I'd like to know is it possible to keep those names confidential? Or by state law, does it,
No.
petitioners have to be released? Is it public record?
I think, do you know, as the city, you'll have to consult the attorney.
They
My
do.
understanding is if you get it certified and you start the petition, then once the petition is filed, the names are public record.
Of the 20 or of the 200?
Of
Well,
the
probably
20.
the 20 and the 200. But if
That-
it was never turned in,
But I'm just saying that I can understand why people's reluctance to sign if their name's gonna be plastered all over.
Exactly.
Facebook, just like it was with beer and wine, you know, if you, heaven help you if you happen to sign a petition for that. So I'm wondering if we're gonna ask the attorney about confidentiality in those types of situations where people may not vote their or at least be willing to sign their name on the dotted line for fear of reprisal in the public. Their businesses might be, you know, boycotted or whatever. So that's my concern.
But Rob, neither this commission nor the attorney can change culture
I know
or the
that.
way people react.
I know, but if there was confidential, where it was never able to be, and
How long would it be
That's fine, the-
confidential?
That's why the final one was not turned in,
no,
period.
but I'm just saying that we'll never have another recall in this city because, well,
People are afraid to sign.
I'm afraid to sign. I mean, I talked to business people who would not sign the petition because for fear of their businesses would be boycotted or blackballed or affected in some way. These are good, upstanding citizens who were to hear them speak, were
Exactly.
heavily in favor of it, but yet would not put their name on the dotted line because they knew it'd be on Facebook the next day. That's not what this whole recall system is about. I think that when the charter was written, Facebook was not there. So we need to adopt something in there to account for Facebook and the public records request so that we can have a recall petition. But not just a recall, what about beer and wine or something of that nature that people want to put on the ballot?
referendum or petition. Okay.
Maybe a redacted, something to the effect of redaction.
We can ask those questions.
2 hours.
Okay, we said that we were going to limit our meetings to 2 hours. It's
Yes.
now 8:02. So if you'd like to adjourn,
You owe us 2 minutes next week then.
oh, okay. So is there a motion to adjourn? Okay.
My second.
Oh, I guess we can't even do that.
One more thing,
We can't do it. We will adjourn.
one more thing.
I know we don't. That's correct. We can just adjourn.
It's just time to go home.
I'd like to put in the minutes the members who are here and the members who are absent. So if you would notate that, please.
I'm sure that will.
And thanks to our city staff for being here
Yes,
till 8 o'clock at night.
thank you.